This is code.org. Let's see what we're doing. Investigate and modify. All right. Run the program to, don't have to tell me twice. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so 85, 92, 76. All right. Then experiment with the program by making the following modifications. Change one line at a time, then run the program after each change to observe the results. What do you notice about that? All right, so we want to modify get grades, and we want it to return a string containing the values in each column for each row. And right now, interesting. So right now, guys, this is only returning, let's see. It looks like the first row, technically, right? And so if they're going to talk about columns, I'm going to format mine like this because I think it's a bit easier to read when learning about this, right? So this is kind of what they mean by the column. 85, 92, 76 is the first column, and then these would be the rows. Now, right now we have a loop, and this loop, let's talk about. So for int row is equal to 0. So we start with 0, right? And that makes sense. We then are going to iterate or loop through. Row, our variable here, always must be less than the length of the weekly grades array. Well, what is the length of this array? And here's when it gets tricky. Notice that this is a double array. So when we ask for the length of the array, well, what it does is get the length of the outer array, if you will. So this, boom, and I might actually move these too so I can be very clear, because this stuff gets confusing quick. So this is an array here and here that contains inner arrays, 3 of them. So the length of weekly grades is 3. Now each of those, right, at index 0 there's another array, at index 1 here there's another array, index 2 there's another array. But the length of weekly grades is 3. Therefore, what happens here is we say at row 0, and index 0, print the result. And actually, we're not printing it. We have an empty string, and then we hit our for loop. During our for loop, we say weekly grades at 0, row, 0 index, smack that into our string. Well, row 0, 0 index, right, is 85. Then we hit the bottom of our loop, go back to the top. It says row plus plus, so that's shorthand for going up by 1 each time. So if row used to be 0, 0 plus 1 is shockingly 1. So row is now 1, and weekly grades 1 at 0 index. So 1, index 0 still though, because again, the row, this first number here, this first index, is for the outer. It's for the row number. So row 1, index 0 is 92, and then we're going to loop back around, hit the bottom, back to the top, row 2, or row 3, but index 2 to 0 is 76. Hit the bottom, back to the top, and now row would be equal to 2, row plus plus, so 2 plus 1 equals 3. 3, is that greater than the length? Is that less than the length of the array? Well, the length of this array, how many rows? 3 rows. 3 is not less than 3. So our loop is done, and we just skip over this, drop to the bottom, and return the result. They want us to loop through everything. So right now we're only doing rows, and let's make sure we use our resources. This is super handy. I'm actually going to right-click copy and do a Control-V or a right-click paste, because I'm going to make use of this. Let me move this line up, though. Couldn't grab it. All right, so now we not only have a row that we want to change, I also am going to want to change the column. So now, as I loop through the row, I can also loop through the column. Boom, boom, boom. Oop, not capitalized. Call. What this should do for us is allow us to go row 0, right? So this would be row 0. And then we hit this loop. And now this loop is going to need to run however many times something is in the row. So let's go over here. When we get to, I'm going to bring this over. Copy. Because this is going to be confusing. All right, guys, hang with me here. All right, so we have 2 loops now. This loop and this loop. The first loop is for the row, right? Row 1, row 2, row 3, or actually row 0, row 1, row 2. The second loop is for the column. So we hit the loop, we're at row 1 and we go, or row 0, index 0, we go okay, and now we hit this second loop. So currently, what we're talking about is row is at 0. So it's this row right now. That's where we're at, okay? Then we go ahead and hit this loop right here. And it says, so now I have to go through each column. Now, how do I know how many items are in a column? Well, weekly grades 0. Okay, well, what is weekly grade 0? That is this index. So the length of this index, well, what's at this index? It's an array. So at that index, we're getting the length, and the length is 4. There's 4 items. So now I'm saying column is equal to 0, column must be less than 4, column plus plus. And we can go ahead and iterate through plunk, 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 pushing the results, pushing that information, 85, 90, 78, 91, into our result string. We then hit the bottom, right? So after we iterate through, after we add 1 to column each time, column starts at 0, we hit 85, column then zoop, goes up to 1, we get 90, zoop, column goes up to 2, 78, zoop, column goes up to 3, 91, zoop, column is now 4. 4 is not less than the length of weekly grades at 0, which is 4. So then it's done, hits the bottom, hits this loop, zoop. Now we have to go to row 1, which is this one, and do it all over again. Then we return everything together. Let me clean this back up. Let's give it a shot. Let's see what I broke. Boom, and there they all are. This is going to be tricky, but it's really important to understand this. So what do you think the purpose of 0 and weekly grades is? That is to get the length of the first array. We could even change that up, guys. Instead of having a 0 here, I could do row if we wanted, but it really doesn't matter. I already hit up on that. Add the following code. Oh, they want us to do a new line each time? That's fun. I'll do that. So after each one, here, and that means we'll go through the entire column right here, right? I must loop through it. And then before going to the next row, this is the line break character. Bam. Awesome. Hey, this is going to be super useful. I'm excited to see what else we do with it. Onward.